Alright everyone, time for today's second video. We're going to talk about something that I've talked about before in brief, but I've never made a singular video that's openly encouraging people to make it something larger. Right now we see a bunch of social and political reform attempts, like you have the populists in the GOP targeting precincting and stuff like that, underwhelming, the rhino-con hegemon of the party from the ground up, which is something I've spoken of. You see school boards getting tossed aside for endorsing bullshit revisionism, commie wokeness. That's good, again, bottom up. They're trying to reform things at the local level. Another thing that people must start doing, I would say this goes out especially to the free staters in the state of New Hampshire. You've got many tens of thousands, arguably over 100,000 libertarians settled in the state of New Hampshire. It is the only state where if you're on trial, you're allowed to openly proclaim to the jury their capability of nullifying the verdict and you can't be held in contempt, I think, if I remember correctly. And yet I don't see a huge movement towards informing people there in the great state of New Hampshire, which is at this point probably the best state in the United States to move to, I would say, if you believe in liberty. I don't think that's much up for argument. I think they've outstripped the Texans at this point. Work harder, Texas. You got to be more like New Hampshire. Get some more Gadsden flags and AR-15s and shit. Anyway, not a huge concerted effort to try to let people know about the existence of jury nullification. Now, for those of you not aware what it is, jury nullification has been successfully employed before, I'll get into the history of it in a moment, to try to nullify laws that themselves are unlawful. So a big example is prohibition. Now, of course, that was not unlawful. There was a constitutional amendment and everything. What happened under prohibition is that a significant proportion of the population wanted booze. They wanted to drink. Booze started being made mainly by old hermits out in the woods who had a little cabin, and their stills would get busted up by the feds and shit, and by people like Al Capone. Gangland America. These people were not nice individuals, but they were supplying something that was in demand. So you have speakeasy culture and all these things that in retrospect we say the criminals were cool and the government was stupid and wrong and great. What they would do, therefore, is that juries would refuse to convict people even when there was absolute evidence of their crime. Miss Janie here was stabbed during an altercation by this bootlegger. We know that he stabbed her. We've got 20 people who saw him do it in broad goddamn daylight. He staggers into the police department with the knife still dripping blood and says, yeah, I just stabbed someone. Fuck you. Gets put in jail, gets put on trial. But people say, hey, he's the one supplying the booze and Miss Janie was an undercover cop, so fuck it. We're just going to find him not guilty. This was done fairly recently, I believe, in the city of Rutland, where I'm from in Vermont. Although, during nullification, you can't bring it up openly there, I have a feeling that's what happened. A woman walked into the police department, and on camera, we have footage of it, walked up and stabbed an officer. Now, my understanding was there was some sort of reason for the stabbing. It wasn't just random or something. It was the officer, I think, had somehow fucked her over, or the police had fucked her over in some capacity. She got found not guilty. That's interesting. She literally stabbed him. We know this because we've got a video footage piece of it. I saw it myself. But she got off scot-free. Probable jury nullification. What I would say is that people need to make others aware about it. Now, keep in mind, if you know about jury nullification and you get asked when you're being selected for the jury, which is not likely, but it's possible, now, of course, if you say yes, you won't get selected and can't use it. If you say no, technically speaking, you're lying, and that's at least dubiously legal at best. Keep in mind that if you know what it is, you can also potentially get out of jury duty by notifying them of this. So think of it as a two-part gift. Number one, you're civically lazy and you're like, I don't want to be sequestered in a fucking room with 11 other people I don't know for several days, so fuck it. Hey, yeah, I can't serve because I'll nullify the verdict. Ha ha ha. Or on the other hand, you can potentially spare someone jail time for a non-crime. When should this be used? Gun crimes, so-called, that don't involve a victim. Hey, we've got a magazine restriction here. He had a magazine that's too big. He imported a weapon illegally or something. Nullify it. Shouldn't be a law. The law itself violates the Second Amendment. Drug crimes. You have the right to do whatever the fuck you want. The government shouldn't make any legislation for or against any intoxicating substance unless it involves some aggravating feature like, yeah, not only did he smoke crack, he then proceeded to drive his 18-wheeler down the road hitting several street lamps. So, that's significant. Okay, that makes sense. As a victim, Of course, in that case, you're potentially killing people. But if he's smoking crack in his own apartment, the cops break in, bust his skull, and then put him up on felony drug charges, nullify it. Just say, oh, no, I don't think he's guilty. What happens when the other jurors raise their eyebrows and say, well, there was plenty of crack found at his house. Maybe it was planted. I can't be sure. I'm in good faith. I can't put this person away thinking there's a possibility that there was planted evidence, or that it was his neighbor's crack, or something else under the sun. Maybe he's just mentally damaged and he thought it was, he thought it was Parmesan cheese. Might also bring up to the jury, hey, by the way, I can think of some crack-smoking politicians' kids who magically aren't up on the same charges. Maybe it's time to teach them bastards a lesson. It's been used successfully before. The reason why Prohibition went away wasn't because a bunch of people took to the streets drinking booze. It's not because the temperance movement didn't have significant public popularity. It was more than a 50-50 proposition before Prohibition. Once they realized how many people were getting drunk on the sly and couldn't get treated for it, then it begins to wane. But the reason why it was finally abandoned is because it was unenforceable. Imagine if the people of the United States started putting up flyers at the local library, where there's usually a little post-it board where you can do that. At their city council, at the outside of courts, sometimes have a little, like a post-up board and stuff. You have a town square, and now there's a little post-it board literally in the middle of the green in Woodstock. There are people that pay attention to those things. It's not like, making a YouTube video and talking to 50, 100,000 people, but it'll do. And local action is where jury nullification takes place. Most charges are local or state. Inform people it exists, and give them some examples. Why should the government be able to usurp the Second Amendment? Half the population doesn't believe in any form of gun control. I'm sure that if they select 12 people, one of them could potentially know about jury nullification, believe in the supremacy of the Second Amendment. On drugs, the vast majority of the U.S. population no longer supports waging the drug war, especially against weed and stuff like that. Most of them don't know that if they're selected for a jury, that if there's actual evidence and the person is provably guilty, they're still allowed to say not guilty. They can do whatever they want. The judge can't hold them in contempt unless they're stupid enough in the course of nullifying the verdict to mention that that's what they're doing. If they keep that card close to their chest and just say, I just don't believe in the guilt. The evidence isn't enough. I can't convict because I'd rather let a guilty person go than punish someone who might not be guilty. It's going to screw them up. They'll probably end up an axe murderer next or something. There are a million different charismatic arguments you can make to wiggle yourself around the topic of having to bring up the fact that you're effectively trying to nullify a bad law. At the state level, this should be most important. Go into the areas where people congregate. Again, they have little post-it boards and shit. In some areas, you can put a sticker on a lamppost saying, look up jury nullification, secure your rights, or something like that. In some places, that's a vandalism charge, which is very ironic. But in other places, it's not considered illegal. You'd have to look into your local ordinances on that. Certainly, those post-it boards, as long as it's not something obscene or something like that, you can post up whatever you want. I see pieces of paper all the time. You go by a post-it board or something. There'll be a paper and it says, well, contact me if you're interested in learning about the structure of beach sand or something. And then it'll have the little paper slips down below with contact info, like a website or an email or something. People can take it off and do that. Keep in mind, you'll face hefty resistance. If this ever became even a minor movement, the legacy media would flip. They would flip their shit. By the way, when they do this, because they're attention whores, they would unknowingly promulgate awareness of jury nullification further. So maybe a little bit of antagonism goes a long way and can be a good thing. I'm not talking just to people within New Hampshire. Literally, if the people watching this video that are in the United States, and I'm sure that there are other countries where jury trials exist, where you could probably do something like this similarly. Of course, you may get, a visit from the KGB or something, but, it applies in some countries. I think here in the Netherlands, they don't do jury trials. They have like a tribunal of judges, which I find very, very funny. It's very charming and old world. It is very, very European in structure. I'm not sure how wise it is, but whatever. Maybe they should know about nullification. But anyway, if you're in the U.S., Canada, I think, has jury trials, doesn't it? Or do they still do magistrates and shit like British style? I don't know. Anyway, let other people know. Your family should know. Your friends should know. Your neighbors should know. Your community should know. It'd take you like 2 hours of effort. Print up some flyers, make some stickers, fucking go out and post them up, and make sure to howl it from the rooftops. Maybe if let's say that you're wealthy, you know, your Uncle Pennybags, buy a billboard. That's a thing in most states. I think, isn't Vermont the only state that doesn't allow billboards? I think. And there are ways around it. It's just, you know, frowned upon generally. There's a reason why you can actually see the mountains if you're in Vermont. When you get over to New Hampshire and some of the more urban areas, it becomes a little more difficult. It's still pretty scenic, though. It's fairly environmentally friendly. So let people know. The Great Jury Nullification Project must begin. People need to know their rights. Hell, this should be employed for all of the capital insurrectionists. You know, those peaceful protesters that are being hammered with wanton charges at the moment, and most of which are going to end in plea deals, sweetheart deals, if they get any significant charge at all. Well, there should be a jury involved. You know, for those few that actually go to court, most of the people will cut a plea deal, to be clear. That's the other problem. Most of the time, people will just cut a plea deal because they know that the preponderance of evidence is always against them, even if they're innocent. There are plenty of people that didn't commit any crime that are in various prisons, state prisons, federal prisons, and jails, simply because they said, oh, fuck it. If I go on trial, I'm going to get nailed. Lawyers will tell you that. If you go on trial, you do it at your own hazard. I'll help you as much as I can. I believe you're innocent and stuff, but remember, these people have more money than you because they can literally take anything they want at any time. They can make your life living hell. They say that you sell drugs, but they're willing to get you on a minor misdemeanor charge of possession and reckless conduct or something. You probably won't even serve any time. You'll pay a fine. We'll get this behind us. You're not a felon. You're not on any weird registry or anything. You had a little crack and they're willing to drop the sales charge. Just do it. Just avoid the felony charge because there's always a chance that it'll stick even if I know that you're innocent. That's what people are warned to do. We shouldn't have a society in which the average person has to cut a plea deal. We should have a society in which that sort of thing's a rarity and the average person's like, fuck you. We should have more reluctance to charge as well for many crimes, and a lot of them shouldn't be crimes at all. So start nullifying them. Your neighbor had 30-round magazine, and you've got a 15-round magazine bullet limit? Oh, fuck it. Nullify the verdict. Oh, well, it shouldn't be a law. Refuse to convict. That way the law eventually becomes unenforceable. As with the drug war, and eventually the states refuse to begin prosecuting people. This happened long ago in the drug war. It happens to some extent already with guns. Both of those especially should be the main primary target. That's about all. Peace out.